Today I'd like to talk about tempering some of the highs and lows associated with being human, and also particularly as this manifests in the creative process. There are many associations of creativity and creative people with that kind of bipolar or cyclothemic wave oscillation between a peak of almost mania, delusion of grandeur level of creativity, that you have this urgency and this idea and this thing that you wake up at 3 a.m. thinking the world just needs to hear or read or experience, and then the kind of crashing down of the cold light of day, when those things that you've made or done are not seen or held or witnessed. And we've all seen these representations of that in terms of the story of someone like Van Gogh, or a lot of the creative people that are referenced when we talk about people who suffered for their art / had great waves of inspiration and mania. Maybe even some of Mozart's genius level output, kind of frenzied creation. If you've seen the film Amadeus, there's a lot of that kind of visually depicted. And there's also a book called Playing with Fire, Bipolar Disorder and the Artistic Temperament, or something like that, that has graphs even of the outputs of various composers or artists in terms of when they were most productive, and correlating with maybe when they were ill or in asylums or whatever. And there's this kind of ongoing conflation of creative genius with balanced against the lows of depression and misery. And I think the more we learn about brain chemistry and that sort of dopaminergic drive, pursuit of things that are external in the future, the goal, the boon, the treasure of the thing that we need to produce, the pedestal that we put our kind of ideal artwork or whatever it is on, and the compromises we create in pursuit of that in terms of our personal health or our sleep or our relationships. It's quite a strange and magical thing, really. And I say strange and magical thing because there's this tendency that I've certainly had to inflict a lot of judgment on these patterns and these waves that I definitely experience. I'm not diagnosed as anything particularly like bipolar, although there's definitely those traits, there's definitely those moments, and there's been particularly deep, dark, depressive episodes on a formal diagnosis basis, and other suspected forms of neurodivergence that I have not labelled or sought diagnosis for. Once, I think with everyone who is experiencing and learning to sort of ride the waves and these peaks and troughs of their own rhythms, there's definitely certain cases where people, they do need to seek diagnosis and medication and things like that to be able to maintain a sort of homeostasis of gentler peaks and troughs, so that they can just function and not be getting whiplash between these emotional extremes and this dysregulation and all of the problems that causes and has caused for many people, I suppose, with the gift / affliction of these sort of divergent states, if we want to call them that. And I feel like the first thing is just removing the judgment. Like, whatever you're experiencing and whatever waves you're riding, whatever states of normality or insanity you are experiencing it, there still can be a lot of judgment and shame, a lot of pathologising them. And again, that pathologising and that labelling, diagnosis, professional treatment and support can be absolutely essential and vital and life-saving. So definitely there should be no judgment or shame around that if that's what you need. But also just to remove some of the yeah, the shame and judgment and confusion around the fact that you experience these things. That's one of the first steps. I certainly had, I remember just, I don't know, there was this kind of like, when I first had counselling, I was 17 at the time, and I'd had a range of different medical professionals, psychiatry person and a type sort of counsellor, giving me various forms of support and advice, all through the NHS, amazingly, and all free. And yeah, that's the National Health Service in England, if anyone's watching from anywhere else. But yeah, once my counsellor said to me when I think I was bemoaning my sleep pattern, and my mood swings, and how I was just like unable to, I just felt like so like, I can't live like this, I can't be like this. It's like, it's just too like dysregulating, it's too, you know, weird, and I just feel all over the place. I'm confused, I don't know who I am, I'm not sleeping right. And there was this like kind of, it was like I was comparing it to some ideal or normal way to be. And she said something which is like, what's wrong with the way that you are? And I was like, well, you know, I should be getting 8 hours of sleep and blah, 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 all of this kind of like crap around how we're conditioned to think we have to function in this like normal way and this normal sort of sleep schedule. And all of these things can be super helpful, and sleep hygiene and having a consistent restful sleep is important. But also we can really damage ourselves when we're sort of comparing the way that we're experiencing our ebbs and flows and judging them as being bad, and then we're creating resistance to them, and then we're giving them importance, and then we're kind of, all that's going to do is perpetuate them, basically. So removing some of the charge of the negative judgment and the bemoaning of those things as, you know, we're suffering because of them, that's a really important way to also empower oneself and step out of that victim consciousness identification of, I am the victim of, you know, my mood swings or whatever these things are that are stopping me being normal or having like this ideal form of existing, whatever that is, even if that's not familiar or natural to us. And so part of it is like maybe finding a way in your life to allow that flow to not be too damaging. And my point here, I've only made 2 notes for this video. One is like removing that judgment, and the other is going with your own flow. And I think going with one's own flow is really important, and also just learning language around how to communicate that to others, because if you're maybe somewhat dysfunctional or dysregulated or abnormal in your rhythms or your sleep or your whatever, that can affect interpersonal relationships. It can be antisocial, and it can cause you to be isolated, and people want to sort of solve that or rescue you or lecture you about things and how you should be. But really it's kind of, like if it's not a problem for you to have a certain rhythm, like I certainly have, there's always particularly like insomniac points, and I've identified that those are occur in rhythm and in sync with my menstrual cycle, and there's particular points that happen in my cycle where they're accompanied by flights of ideas and some of these like extreme ebbs and flows. And learning a bit about your own patterns and triggers is super helpful, but also like not necessarily trying to change yourself, because that might not be possible. And definitely if it is extreme, if it's interfering with your rhythms and your interpersonal relationships, or it's becoming sort of a real problem, then getting the help of the professionals that can support that, or even certain herbal, like more homeopathic forms of medicine, even like plant medicine, things that are going to help you regulate, meditation, things that are going to help you just find balance and some sort of stillness, or just equip you with a little bit of resilience, or a little bit of a distance, a little bit of Like if you see it as flow and you're riding these waves, perhaps you're just learning skills, or you're asking for support to help make your ship or the raft that you are riding along on a little bit more resilient or robust. Perhaps there's some emotional self-connection that can happen so that you can perceive and sort of feel and meet the sensations that happen in your body in correlation with those waves in a way that's non-judgmental. And that's around maybe, learning how to meditate, or not necessarily meditate, but just maybe move in a way that helps, soften some of the feelings or resistance. Learning skills to label your feelings or observe, and this might be CBT type things where you're thinking about what your thoughts are, the things that are coming up as commentary. I've kind of come to the belief now that I just have high sensitivity, and there are often sensations in my being, and there's a level of dysregulation or activation, whether I'm up and inspired or whether I'm down and anguished. There's just a particularly acute sensitivity to sensations and any form of dysregulation, and then that manifests as commentary or thoughts or whatever. And actually sometimes just saying simple words about feelings, like what I'm feeling, what it feels like in the body, so it's not particularly loading that feeling with an emotional resonance. It's maybe that, there's a lot of sensation in my heart space right now, feeling quite activated, feeling a bit wired or frenzied, maybe just giving yourself a 3-word check-in, or having a 3-word check-in with someone else, and allowing those feelings to be there, and learning a bit more about your nervous system and what ways you can move through and dance with those feelings. And I'm dancing now because I think dancing is one of the greatest forms of helping you go with the flow and find your balance and be in your body, and I'd really recommend it. And I don't dance a lot formally, but I've started just moving around more in my daily life, and it's helping me hugely to dispel some of this excess energy stuff that's going on. So that's about it really. I would like to point people in the direction of the work of Deb Dana and on polyvagal theory and this whole idea of befriending our nervous system, because I've personally found it really useful to understand or sense when I am in an activated, sympathetic fight, flight, freeze response, how I can be with myself then, or what I can do in those moments, versus when I'm in freeze is dorsal kind of, so in a dorsal response, which is to a low place. And the way that those are often represented actually are in these kind of peaks and troughs, or these graphs, which are also helpful with the analogy that I've been using of the waves or the peaks and troughs. And it's not to say that everyone should be on this happy homeostasis of ventral regulated balance all the time, and we should just be here in a sort of